Hey everyone! Welcome to The Young and the Restless. I'm Jane, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Young and the Restless, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in. According to Friday, July 25th spoilers for The Young and the Restless, Carter has a story for Kane Ashby, and Sally Spectra will assist with a first aid emergency. This is what YNR fans may anticipate, as Nikki Newman will likewise be in a tight spot. Nick Newman will need more first aid knowledge than Sharon Newman and Billy Abbott can provide because he is in danger of bleeding out in the storage area. Given her apparent expertise in that area, Sally will step in and try to prevent Nick from losing blood. Billy might try to find Kane and hope that there is a way to call for assistance after all, even if he has been informing his visitors that they are stranded without cell coverage. Kane may eventually have to give in and seek Nick some help because his phone secretly functions. Since Carter unintentionally implicated himself, Kane will press his helper for some answers in the meanwhile. Carter, or at least someone who knows who did, appears to have actually placed the knife beneath Nick's sink. Naturally, that will raise concerns about Carter's potential involvement in Damian Kane's death. Was Damian the real aim of Carter, or did he only show there later and attempt to implicate Nick? Carter may argue that he was attempting to keep his employer out of jail because he knew Kane would appear guilty. Carter might be responsible for Damian's death, but what if someone else carried out the crime? Given that Nikki will be in a tight spot during Friday's drama-filled episode, it's a possibility to think about. While Carter is busy being questioned, what if the real murderer targets Nikki? Since Carter is unable to be in two places at once, it may be possible that someone else is the murderer. In any case, Victor Newman will assume control when additional drama arises, and he may be able to save Nikki from a terrible destiny. It appeared to have been a calm morning in Genoa City. The Abbott Winters Foundation building, where Sally Spectra had been working long hours to divert her attention from the recent turmoil in her personal life, was bathed in a gloomy, somber light as the sky hung low with overcast clouds. She tried to concentrate by focusing on fabric samples and design sketches, but her mind kept going back to her recent interactions with Nick and the way he had gazed at her as if he was still unsure about whether to forget her or forgive her. Sally brushed off the physical signs of the tension of her days, which included headaches, exhaustion, and an uncomfortable constriction in her chest, attributing them to stress and sleep deprivation. She didn't anticipate that the most terrifying event of her week would not be a passionate outburst or a betrayal in the boardroom, but rather a first aid crisis that would permanently connect her fate to Carter Dumas, the enigmatic colleague Kane Ashby had been secretly working with. Sally passed out that afternoon at the basement storage level while inspecting a cargo of items. There was only the soft thump of her body against the chilly concrete, no dramatic gasp or cry for assistance. She was unconscious and alone, her pulse was feeble and her breathing was shallow. Due to a staff function taking place across town, the building was almost completely unoccupied, and the basement was the only area where the security cameras had not yet been updated. Of all people, Carter was the one who discovered her. He was only in the building because Kane had requested him to covertly grab a private document pertaining to a dormant legal trust associated with Chancellor Winters. He hadn't intended to be there. They had a strict, brutal plan that didn't allow for any difficulties like Sally Spectra, and he hadn't even wanted to get involved in anything else. However, troubles always found Carter, just as they always did Kane. And he knew something was seriously wrong the moment he turned the corner and saw Sally's face pale and her lips tinted blue, her red hair spread out across the cement like a fallen flame. Carter froze for a second. Even though he hadn't had to handle a medical emergency in years, his memories of his combat training and trauma response in Australian Special Operations came flooding back. He knelt next to her, felt her pulse, which was already feeble, and looked for any wounds. No obvious bleeding or fall-related symptoms. Despite the cold, she was perspiring and her chest rose in shallow, irregular patterns. Heat exhaustion? No. Heart? Perhaps. Dehydration? Maybe. Unless he did anything now, none of it mattered. When he took out his phone, he discovered there was no signal and the basement reception was dead. Unless he took her upstairs, no aid would arrive. He grunted and yanked her into a fireman's carry as he climbed the 2 flights of industrial stairs, his pace belying the weight of his load and the urgency he felt in his chest. "Come on," he muttered. The front desk clerk was back, but the main lobby upstairs was still largely empty. Carter yelled for assistance, gently placed Sally on a couch nearby, and told the clerk to dial 911. He then started giving first aid. He raised her legs with deliberate movements, relaxed the tight blouse at her collar, and spoke to her in cool, collected tones. "Sally, you're going to be okay. Remain with me." Even though her eyes were still closed and her breathing was still labored, he said, "I've got you." Carter's hands were still shaking when they loaded her into the ambulance, which soon arrived with the paramedics taking over. The fact that he had saved someone wasn't what shocked him the most, rather, it was the fact that something within of him had stirred. A link. One of the memories. A ghost of another person. It was there even though he didn't want it. Within an hour, Kane reached the hospital. Carter had called, not because anyone else had. He simply stated, "Come," without providing an explanation. "Right now." Kane didn't inquire when Carter used that tone in room 314. He blinked as though he wasn't sure if what he was witnessing was genuine when he entered the hospital room and saw Sally lying in bed, pallid, and hooked up to monitors. "What took place?" Kane inquired in a low, rattling voice. Still wearing his navy jacket, which was a little smudged from the carry, Carter leaned against the window with his arms folded. "In the basement, she passed out. Low blood sugar with heat fatigue. Potential heart problem. Tests are being conducted by doctors." Kane approached the bed to observe the normally vivacious woman's weakness. "And you were present?" "I located her." Kane whispered, "You saved her life," while gazing at Carter. "I did what I could until help arrived." "Avoid doing that," Carter said. "Don't try to change who I am." "I am not," Kane stated. Carter remained silent. "But you did what no one else could." He simply gazed at Sally's still form before turning away. The fact that was now tying them together even more tightly than before, Sally's life was now a part of their story, was what neither man spoke out loud. Kane was the first thing Sally saw when she regained consciousness that night. His eyes were glassy as he sat in the chair next to her, his fingers twitching nervously around the rim of a paper coffee cup. "Hey," he murmured. "You really frightened us." "What occurred?" she rasped. She spoke in a dry, almost audible voice. She appeared shocked when Kane told her that Carter had located her, omitting the more dramatic elements in favor of a gentle explanation. "Carter?" Startled, she muttered. "Was he present?" Kane gave a nod. "You were taken out of the basement by him. Kept you alive until the paramedics came." She averted her gaze, finding it difficult to comprehend that information. She hardly knew Carter, having just nodded curtly at him a few times during business. She had thought he was aloof, evasive, and even threatening. She owed her life to him now. She hurriedly brushed away the tear that fell down her cheek because the feeling was too strong. Kane remained silent and did not press. Until visiting hours ended, he simply sat next to her. The air between Carter and Kane was heavier than normal when they met again later that week, this time in the shadows of a silent parking garage. "You instructed me to avoid sight. Remain aloof," Carter said. "But you continue to pull me farther. You made a decision. You had the option to leave her. I couldn't. Not now. She made me think of someone." That confession hung between them for years, heavy and unsaid, "My sister." Carter seldom ever discussed his family. Kane was unaware that he had a sister. Did she die? Kane inquired, speculating already. Carter gave a nod. Fell into a coma from diabetes. By themselves. For hours, no one could find her. It was too late by the time they did. Kane let out a deep exhale. The haste, the panic, and the fact that Carter hadn't hesitated now made sense. Sally wasn't the only one. It was recollection. It was sorrow. Carter, you saved her. That must have some significance. I don't want it to, Carter yelled, his eyes darting. Because it indicates that I still care if it has any significance. And I'm vulnerable if I care. And this whole thing breaks apart if I'm vulnerable. It doesn't have to, Kane said cautiously. Perhaps this improves the situation. Carter wasn't so sure, though. Both Sally's recuperation and the crisis's knock-on effects persisted throughout the course of the following few days. She had a visit from Nick Newman, who brought flowers and guilt. Adam stood outside her door, but he never intervened. Chloe sent an hourly text. In private moments, however, she inquired about Carter's name in a gentle and inquisitive tone. It was in the hospital garden that she saw him again. When she beckoned him over, he stood awkwardly away. "Thank you," was all she said. "You saved my life." He didn't immediately respond. "You're welcome," he said at the end. "You appear weaker than you actually are." "I had to be," she said. "I know the feeling. Life didn't give me much of a choice." And they realized, in that instant, that suffering knows pain. Surviving is a tribute to surviving. And occasionally, the people you owe the most to are the ones you least expect. The event served as a wake-up call for Kane. He hadn't recognized the personal cost of the war he was fighting because he had been so preoccupied with bringing the Damien case to light, creating a covert empire behind the scenes, and laying traps for adversaries like Nick. He was reminded by Sally's breakdown that individuals, not only pawns, were being impacted. He had no time to be reckless. He also couldn't risk losing Carter to ghosts, anguish, or guilt. He therefore took an uncommon step and opened up. One evening, he handed Carter a glass and said, "You did good, mate." Carter accepted the glass without responding, but he did say, "You saved her, and in doing that, maybe you saved something in yourself too." And he let himself experience it for the first time in years, not the fear, not the plan, not the objective, but the unadulterated, genuine pain of connection. Although the crisis was over, its effects persisted. Spectress Sally was still alive. Carter Dumas was a different person. And Kane Ashby was starting to question if the price he was paying for his war was still worth it. Because salvation was never obtained without sacrifice in Genoa City. And occasionally, the individuals you helped save you also ended up saving you. Sally had always been a person who flourished under duress. Her cool head and fast thinking made her the one to call in an emergency. She didn't think twice about taking action when Carter, her neighbor's little boy, staggered into her yard one day while holding his arm, his face white and smeared with tears. As he attempted to describe what had happened, a fall from the old oak tree in his garden, with a sharp branch cutting deep into his forearm, the boy's breath came in short, terrified gasps. As soon as blood trickled from his fingers onto the grass, Sally's instincts took over. Though her thoughts were racing with the gravity of the situation, she calmly soothed Carter as she led him inside. She was aware that appropriate first aid was essential to preventing infection or worse because the cut was severe, much worse than the typical scrapes and bruises children his age tended to accumulate. Sally mentally went over the procedures she had learned in a wilderness first responder course years prior: evaluate the wound, stop the bleeding, clean it, and protect it, as she reached for her fully stocked first aid kit. Carter grimaced as she carefully pulled his hand away, exposing a cut that made her stomach turn, but she remained calm because she knew her response would affect his. With a stream of soothing conversation to divert his attention, she pushed a clean cloth firmly against the incision, applying consistent pressure to stop the blood flow. Her voice was a calm anchor in the midst of the confusion as she whispered, "Carter, you're doing great. Please just keep your eyes on me. Breathe with me, in and out." His wide, terrified eyes met hers, and she saw him attempting to mimic her composure by shakily imitating her measured breaths with his little chest rising and falling. After several anxious minutes, the bleeding subsided, and Sally gingerly raised the cloth to see the damage. Although she probably needed sutures for the deep, jagged cut, her top priority right now was to clean it to avoid infection. Carter flinched when the antiseptic solution touched him, but he didn't draw away when she grabbed for it and warned him it might sting. Knowing how much strength it took for a child to bear suffering without losing their cool, she made sure to commend him when his bravery struck her. She demythologized the procedure as she worked, explaining to him why the bandage needed to be snug but not too tight, how the antiseptic killed germs, and the significance of keeping the wound dry. Sally noticed the change in his posture as the tension left his petite frame as Carter listened carefully, his anxiety slowly giving way to curiosity. After cleaning and dressing the wound, she assisted him in sitting up and gave him a glass of water and a cookie from the jar on the counter as a token of appreciation for his courage. Sally knew this wasn't over, though, even as Carter nibbled on the biscuit and his color returned. She promptly called his mother, explaining the situation in a cautious yet strong tone, since the wound required expert care. Sally could hear the guilt, the "I should have been watching him more closely" that every parent has in situations like this, and the panic in Mrs. Thompson's voice. She calmed her, saying that although Carter had shown great bravery and that accidents do happen, he needed to see a doctor very away. Mrs. Thompson was at Sally's door in a matter of minutes, her face a mask of concern as she embraced Carter and whispered gratitude to Sally in between frantic inquiries about what had transpired. As they rushed to the car, Carter gave her a feeble wave from the back seat as Sally handed her the first aid kit, which had new bandages and instructions for the doctor. Long after they had departed, Sally stood in her peaceful kitchen, exhausted but relieved as the adrenaline gradually subsided. She mentally reenacted what had happened, examining what she had done. Had she exerted enough pressure? Did she need to apply a tourniquet? Had she sufficiently cleaned the wound? As is typically the case after an emergency, the doubts began to creep in, but she forced them away by telling herself that everything had been done correctly. Nevertheless, the experience made her consider how unprepared most people were for even small medical emergencies. At that much blood, how many parents would have froze? How many wouldn't have known when to get more help or how to stop the bleeding? It served as a clear reminder of the importance of first aid knowledge, particularly for those who provided care for youngsters. The following day, Mrs. Thompson contacted Sally in a much lighter tone to inform her that Carter had received sutures and was contentedly resting, with the doctor complimenting the initial care he had received. Mrs. Thompson expressed her gratitude by saying, "He said you probably saved him from a nasty infection." Sally grinned in relief, but the topic soon shifted to the wider picture, emphasizing how easily things could have gone wrong and how crucial it was that everyone be familiar with basic first aid. By the end of the call, the two women had come up with a plan. They would invite a local paramedic to teach vital skills at a free first aid session for their community. Sally even offered to host the event in her lawn, envisioning both parents and children learning how to manage minor scrapes and choking hazards. A few weeks later, Sally was filled with a profound sense of fulfillment as she observed a group of neighbors practicing bandaging skills under the supervision of a kind EMT. Carter's previous tragedy was turned into a teaching moment as he proudly demonstrated how to clean a fictitious wound, his arm now healing wonderfully. While the crisis had initially been terrible, it had also served as a catalyst for a positive development, a community uniting to educate, prepare, and defend one another. Sally knew that her neighbors would be prepared the next time an emergency arose as she observed their attentive and eager to learn faces. Since first aid was about empowering people, transforming fear into action, and making sure that no one had to face a crisis alone, it was about more than just healing wounds. Their neighborhood saw a sea change as a result of Carter's accident story, which served as a reminder of how fleeting life can be and the impact that even a small amount of knowledge can have. Sally had evolved into more than just the cool neighbor with an extra bandage. She was now a teacher, a leader, and a comforting presence when things became tough. Additionally, Carter, the young child who had come into her yard in a state of fear and bleeding, had unintentionally sparked a movement toward increased community resilience and readiness. It was a legacy that emerged from a crisis, demonstrating that even the most terrifying circumstances can bring about development, camaraderie, and, in the end, optimism. The attendees stayed after the program ended, telling tales of their own near misses and close calls in a tone that was both relieved and full of confidence. Heart full, Sally nodded as she listened. She was aware that mishaps would continue to occur, children would continue to scale trees, burns would still occur in kitchens, and life would always present unforeseen risks. However, their neighborhood was slightly stronger and safer now. And that was more than sufficient for Sally. She would never forget the image of Carter's wide, trusting eyes as she had wrapped his arm. It would serve as a constant reminder of why she had responded so swiftly and with so great concern. Ultimately, first aid was about more than just the technical procedures. It was about the human connection, the readiness to help when someone else was in pain, and the significant influence that one person's composed demeanor could have during a chaotic situation. And Sally gave herself a silent moment of pride as the sun sank on that beautiful evening, laying long shadows across her property. In addition to helping Carter that day, she had assisted a whole community in re-establishing itself in the face of crises. And that was a cause for celebration, she believed. What could happen when people decided to be ready, to care, to act was demonstrated by the first aid kits strewn all over picnic tables, the laughing of kids performing CPR on dummies, and the sincere discussions between parents about emergency plans. The story of Sally's first aid crisis had become Carter's story, which had then become the story of their neighborhood, one of resiliency, education, and the unwavering faith that they could overcome whatever challenge life presented.